You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
The Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents Epic Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host,
Bruce and Daniella Fenton.
Too much to learn, you say. Cover up is fine, that's your plan, not mine. I'm ready to be told. Secrets to unfold. It's our time to come of age. Time for truth to turn the page. We wanna be inside the dark, live within a question mark. Are they your friend or foe? Tell me now. We need to know. Need to know. Need to know.
Welcome to Epic Voyages online radio tonight, March 20th, and our number is 888-919-2355. Our website where you can follow all our work and the show are www.inceptionradio.com, also www.epicvoyages.com. We also have a YouTube channel, and we broadcast on Fridays on darkmatterradio.net, 5 p.m. PST and 8 p.m. EST. Well, welcome to Epic Voyages Radio online and Inception Radio Network. We are your hosts for tonight, Daniella and Bruce Fenton. Tonight we have two very special guests all the way from Australia, Stephen and Evan Strong. They are a father and son team from northern New South Wales, where they have spent years learning and living with different Aboriginal tribes from the New South Wales region. Stephen is a secondary school teacher with a very extensive background in archaeology and education, as well as Aboriginal law and contemporary history. Evan also has extensive knowledge in Aboriginal culture, law and customs, and has a background in sociology and psychology. Together they have co-written several books, such as Mary Magdalene's Dreaming, a comparison of Aboriginal wisdom and Gnostic scripture, Constructing a New World Map, Forgotten Origin, Ancient Aliens in Australia, Pleiadian Origins of Humanity, and Shunned, which is their latest work. They also have a website, www.forgottenorigin.com, where you can follow all their latest work and origins of all their investigations and findings. They have presented their latest book, which tests the out-of-Africa theory and explains the truth behind the Australian Aboriginal. Shunned is the hidden history of the Australian Aboriginals, which are the original people. This is the most startling book to date by Stephen and Evan, whereby they challenge the out-of-Africa theory and strongly suggest that the DNA and archaeological evidence found in Australia shows us where the modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, derived from. It also speaks about their advanced culture, extensive knowledge in spirituality, religion, medicine, navigation, and engineering skills. Portrayed as backwards and uncivilized cultures of savages, the Australian Aboriginals were stripped of their beliefs and customs. They suffered from genocide, exploitation, and suppression on all levels. In this book, the truth is revealed about how it all really happened. There is over 30 years of research collected with hard fact information on the reality of the true Australian Aboriginal being the first human, as told by the elders in collaboration with the Strongs. who have been extremely privileged to be able to share in the collection of this information. Two men who are trusted outright by the elders in sharing the real facts, history, evidence, and dreamtime stories of the beginnings of humanity as known by the first Aboriginal people. Stephen and Evan, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. We are so glad you could be here and are really excited to hear about all your research of late, as well as your book Shunned and the Crystal Skull research. I know there is a huge time difference, whereby here it's Monday night and there in Australia it's Tuesday afternoon. Talk about time travel. How have you been, guys?
Excellent, very good. Thank you so much for asking to join in.
We're very happy to be here.
It's so good to hear you. How's your research been going lately?
It continues all the time. We have a problem. There's only two of us and there are so many places to go to. We just can't get to them. So we sort of make a list and we get to the list about a year after it's ended, don't we?
Yeah. There's so much going on here in Australia. It's astounding.
There's a lot more. Everyone's overlooked this country and looked upon it, well, it only began 200 years ago. The reality is, throw a lot more noughts on that. It began a long, long time ago, and we're starting to find every day we get new information. We just don't really know where to set the boundaries because I don't think there are any.
Yeah, sure. Your latest book, Shunned, has been released. You mentioned DNA evidence that proves that original men came from Australia and then they spread to other places worldwide. How does one so bravely reveal the truth about our origins?
Well, the trick is this. We actually got some contact late last year, it might have been last year, from a student who was doing a PhD in archaeology and wrote to us and said this. He said, we all know that the genetic evidence proves the out of Africa theory is false. This is well known in universities. And they were wondering, this guy was wondering, why isn't it in mainstream? It's sort of like the incentive for us to write one article of many we've written on this. And the reality is that what we have over the last 20 years, there's been study after study that dismisses any link between African and Aboriginal people. In fact, there have been studies that have come out recently that dismisses any link between African people and any other race. It's nothing unusual. And we're not doing any more than acting like bowerbirds here. We just collect the information. Now, if I can share something with you, we did mention this in the book. You've got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, the out of Africa theory is based on genetics, not geography. And in fact, the people who wrote the paper that said there was an Eve and that it began around 150, 180,000 years ago, said this happened probably in Africa. Remember this, right. Professor Wilson and Professor Can never said that it happened in Africa. They said it probably happened in Africa. What people don't know is that both those professors, Wilson and Can, after writing that paper and proclaiming victory, saying the paleontologists were wrong and we were right, then they both did more study in Australia, genetic study in Australia, and both of them came up with a date of over 400,000 years, and both of them said humanity began in Australia. And really, it's not that hard for us to do this. All we've got to do is go and find the information. And I have no idea what that was.
It's a different question.
Yeah, all we have to do is find the information and put it together. It's not that hard to do. Look, just to share something with you, Evan just found this about a year ago, about 8 months ago, maybe.
Yeah, about that.
They did Y chromosome research. And what they actually did was the most extensive Y chromosome research done in the world. And the first thing they said on the first page is that out of Africa theory doesn't fit. It's not part of this. It was never proven, and we prove it doesn't exist. And what they did in the finish is they examined 400 volunteers, and they looked for 13 African genetic markers in their Y chromosome. And they thought, we'll do a tick-off. See how many tick-off there are. You know how many matches they came up with? None. Not one match. Over 5,200 possible hits did they get to link Africans with any group. not just Aboriginal people, any group. Now, we know this is true. We know that Adam cannot possibly be African. And we know that the people who made up the term Eve, that's Wilson and Cairns, said Eve came from Australia. These are not scientific possibilities. These are just findings we've found everywhere. So all we're doing is putting together pieces of a puzzle that's laying on the ground in big fat pieces and no one's prepared to pick them up.
Mm-hmm. Sure. With all the information that you've gathered over the last 30 years and your close contact with these elders, what made you initially work with them, and how did you come about registering yourselves that their claims were true?
Simply a matter of, to begin with, I was working within the education system, and I was involved in writing the senior Aboriginal Studies course and involved in teaching it, and got to know the Aboriginal people and got to talk to them. And because I won the trust of the children, once you win the trust of the children, the adults is very easy because they know if you're on the side of their children, they'll talk to you. So what they started to do is, once they believed we were okay and we didn't belong to a university and didn't belong to a government group, they started to show us the information that they hadn't shown others. So it was a matter of, we were shown things that we knew were wrong, that were in the book, that weren't in the books and weren't in the syllabus and were not being taught in the schools. And if I can share one with you, one most obvious one, I use this a lot, that when Captain Cook raised the flag and stole Australia and began the invasion, read his diary on that day, ladies and gentlemen, and he'll tell you just before he raised the flag, he saw an Aboriginal man walk down the hill with a bow and a bunch of arrows. Now, there's not one curriculum, not one book in Australia that says the Aboriginal people had bows and arrows. In fact, Jack Davis wrote this beautiful poem saying, oh, why did my people not invent the bow and arrow? Well, they did. But my point is this. If it's in Cook's diary, and he said we stood on the deck together, and it's the first one we had seen in the whole of this country. If Cook said they had bows and arrows, they can't even get that into their history books when it was recorded. Have a think about what was said, never recorded, and never shared because they didn't trust us.
So when did it actually dawn on you that you were rewriting history? I mean, you know, with all the books that we've seen in the past about Australian culture, history, civilization, the Aboriginals, Dreamtime, everything, when you put everything together and you put it into perspective, when did it actually hit you that what you were writing was something completely new and completely, probably a very scary topic for a lot of people because they were listening to something for the first time that it was completely not in the books?
It would have to be. It evolved, didn't it?
Yeah, it just gradually evolved into it, I guess.
Look, we never had, like most archaeologists go in the country, they have got their funding, got their theory, and they walk in trying to prove it. We went on the country with no idea what was going on, honestly. We wrote a couple of books, the ones you mentioned earlier, all theoretically for university. We had not seen any archaeological proof. We just put up a theory. So when we walked in there, and I was given ceremony by the Ranger in South Australia. I went down there because they told us they circumnavigated the world in a figure eight in ancient time. Oh, hang on, I've got
That sounds interesting.
That sounds interesting, but it's not that I went there thinking before I heard that I want to prove it because I didn't know it. And then further on, they said, well, you're going to have to get astronomy to prove this. And we said, we've got none. Within 2 days,
looked at each other, we're going to prove.
2 days later, someone rings up and says, we've got all this astronomy. And we thought, oh, we'll go and have a look at that. Then we find out they were the first ones to make a language. We didn't know that. We have walked into every stage of this without any idea where it was going to take us. But we have done one thing. We didn't go in with preconditioned ideas that we've read from books and from syllabus because we knew, the only thing we knew was that was wrong. So when we went in there, as an elder told me recently when an elder took us down to South Australia Museum, he said, I'm going to go take you inside there and show you the truth and give you the answer. You two go back and prove it. So that's our job. They give us the answer, we find the question and the proof.
Mm-hmm. And how did you think the public would take such a strong claim about our origins?
Badly, extremely bad.
Sure.
The government has been openly antagonistic towards us and has done everything they can to take us off mainstream media, and they've done that many times. We don't have at the moment, we were told quite recently, there's quite a few academics who are backing us. We can't use their names, can we?
They're terrified.
They're terrified. And they said there is what is called a palpable, don't tell the strong's attitude within academia about the fact they don't tell us anything lest they give away. I find it fascinating. He was explaining how there's two reactions. One group starts swearing about us and the other group say, I don't want to talk about it. And I think it's fascinating that the academics can either swear at us or stick their head in the sand. And I'm thinking that is why they became academics, so when the truth comes, they can run and hide from it. So the attitude within mainstream, like we've got 21 rocks at the moment that were made by technology that we don't have today. Now, they know that. They know that. They've seen it. They've seen it. And we've got one academic, one of the top academics in this country, who has made contact with the Smithsonian Institute. And they've written back and said, we've never seen anything like that before. Made contact with academics all over the world about these rocks. And not one of them has said it's natural. Not one of them has said it could be marked by stick, bone or stone. But you know what? Not one of them has made contact with us. Not one of them has asked for a photograph of it. And we have offered them to look at it and they won't. So what we have is proof of our tech. We've got rocks there that are over 10,000 years old using technology that we might just have today. And they admit that. They don't deny it. I mean, some of the stuff that was found on these rocks we didn't see, but this academic said, my God, that rock, there's an infill in there that was put in there over 10,000 years ago and it's still there. Well, what glue did they use? Because we don't have one that can stick for 10,000 years. All of these things are there, but they don't want to look. Why don't they want to look? Because they know the facts speak for themselves. So, yeah, look, we didn't know about the rocks. We didn't know there was a language.
No.
We didn't know there were star maps on the rocks, but there are. Those things we weren't. No, we see them.
Yeah, they're simply amazing. I mean, I have seen some of the images that the ones that you have published, and I think they're incredible. I just can't believe that after getting all this information out and inviting people to look at this and to really study this and to sort of open their minds to something new, that they're just so afraid of this information and what could possibly bring.
Well, you know, one of the interesting parts is there's 21 rocks and we've written about 5 so far. I've written about 3 more which are coming up soon. One of those rocks has a perfect rectangular pyramid, doesn't it, Evan?
It does, yes.
All 4 lines meet at exactly the same point. Every line, 3 of the lines are exactly down to the middle, the same line, perfectly straight, and they all meet at the same point. It is a 4-sided pyramid, and it's scratched onto a rock that is as old as the hills. Now, my question is, ladies and gentlemen, when were original people creating geometry, perfect geometry with 4-sided pyramids? I don't remember that in any of the books, but that's what we've got. That one's we haven't even written about yet. That one's coming up. But every one of those rocks has something, another tale to tell about a civilization, ladies and gentlemen, that is incredibly ancient, incredibly advanced, and has technology which they marked on their rocks to remind us of the story. Luckily, they didn't put it on paper or on a computer chip, on a piece of metal, because that would rot, wouldn't it? Fortunately, they put it on a chip, and it's still there to this day. So, yeah, look, we don't know where we're going. We just got an invitation from Word of Yuang to find the truth about that site that others hadn't seen. We just sit around and wait to be asked.
Sure. Wow, that's amazing. I think that the rocks are a completely new book for you because there's going to be so much information coming from them. I think they have a lot to tell.
Oh, they have heaps to tell. I mean, it's still, look, the 5th rock, which we have mentioned, I'm going to tell you now, ladies and gentlemen, we know for a fact they were baking chert onto a base rock, and we know that they actually melted the chert, and we know the temperature they need is 2,000 degrees Celsius. They were melting one rock and putting it on top of a base rock that they've marked on, then pouring a layer of rock on top of it.
And then cutting into that, imprinting into it.
Imprinting it, stamping it, making so many different marks on the rock that every time we look at a new rock, there's a new way of marking there, but there are essential things that repeat themselves. Now, my question is, when did the original people before 1770 have ovens that reached 2,000 degrees Celsius? My answer is that it changes everything. And this is supposed to be the beauty of Australia is before Captain Cook came, no metal tools in this country. That's what every history book says. So we're going to play by their rules. And we say to them, you know we need metal. And we need more for some of this, don't we, Evan?
Yes.
Not just metal. You need laser. You need all sorts of things going on here. And worth bearing in mind, ladies and gentlemen, every one of these rocks has been marked on a top layer of chert. Chert is a silica. And guess what computer chips are made from? Silica. Now, we've got all the markings. I mean, on the second rock, there's about 500 marks. On the first rock, there's at least 200 lines, intersections, and shapes. Those we can see, but they're all placed on chert. What else is in that chert we can't see? This is way too sophisticated for any. Remember at this stage, 10, 12,000 years ago, we're supposed to be all primitive hunter-gatherers. The whole world doesn't have metal, have rock, stick, and stone. There's not a scientist on this planet will tell you those rocks were marked by those things. So let's rewrite the whole of history, not just Australia's history. But remember, when you do that, as we found at another site, the first language, according to a person that was the professor of the Australian Archaeological Society, the first language is the original language, and all other languages of the world, including Gaul, including English, including Anglo-Saxon, including every language you want to name, comes from Australia. That's the base language. What we're finding in all of the different sites is Australia was at the back of the pack for archaeology, for history, for everything. It's come from last to first. It's now standing at the front of the pack, and the rest of the world's got to stand back and look and say, what's going on in this country? You're changing our history. That's what we found.
True. So with all this information that you found, how did you continue? I mean, you wrote Ancient Aliens in Australia, Pleiadian Origins of Humanity, alongside Bruce and I. When did you realise that you were taking on a bit of a different track? I mean, how does Shunned continue from your earlier book?
The big change for us has been, and it was hinted at in Shunned, and it was never hinted at in the first three books, and it's certainly hinted at the book that we wrote with you guys, is the Pleiadian contact in this story. Now, I'm going to tell you that I never spoke about publicly about UFOs, any of that stuff, until about a year and a bit ago, and we deliberately didn't do so because we didn't want to. Because I can tell you, every time we've spoken, we've been criticised for mentioning the Pleiades, haven't we, Evan?
Yeah, you can bet on it.
You can bet on it. Now, we didn't want to go down that path. We had no intentions of going there. But unfortunately, we did make a rule. It's not our story. It's not our script. The original people are on about it all the time, without exception. It's on top, so below. They're obsessed by it. They're obsessed by the stars, they're obsessed by astronomy, and they're obsessed by the ancestry coming from the Pleiades. We don't have a... So you see, in Australia, there are at least 500 different tribal groups. Each of these tribal groups have their own spirits, their own dreaming stories, and their own customs, and they're never the same. But there is one dreaming story that runs across the country and hits all 500, and that's the Seven Sisters. And the Seven Sisters come from the Pleiades, and in every one of those stories, there'll be variations. There'll be minor variations. Sometimes Orion chases and catches one, sometimes she doesn't, and it's always there's minor variations, but the same central theme. It is the only dreaming story in the whole of this country that permeates every part of the culture in every tribe. So if we want to talk about their history and we don't talk about the Pleiades, we've offended our elders, so we don't have a choice. Our elders now, every time we go and see them, we've got a rule now. Every sacred site must have three parts. The part that's in the land, the part that's the story, and the third one is it must have a counterpart in the sky. If it doesn't have a counterpart in the sky, it is not a legitimate site, and they won't acknowledge it.
So you get as on top, so below.
As on top, so below is a mantra we've heard from every elder. They speak about that part of their life. And, of course, we find archaeology that tells us exactly that. We've seen carvings of UFOs, for God's sake. They are definite carvings of UFO, and proportionately the same to each other. We've seen lots of evidence that tells us at some stage, as much as we hate to say it, Pleiadians, and maybe others, but definitely Pleiadians, there's no denying that. I'm not sure about any other group in Australia, maybe elsewhere for the others. They were here. They were here. Their God is called Biami, creation God. Do you realise when he walks on the ground, he only leaves one footprint? Do you know where the other one is? He cut his leg off to make us. That's what they tell us in their dreaming story. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't leave you. You take Mula Mula, who is the wife of Biami. It says in the dreaming stories, she was not born of the earth. She was born from elsewhere and came down for a short period of time, then went back to her home. Then you can take the story of the nameless one, which is the son of Biami. And when he came to earth, despaired, didn't he, Evan?
Yeah, didn't like
it at all.
No, I want to get out of here.
So he climbed up to this tree that mingled with the sky, with the clouds. And when it took off, there was smoke and flames behind it. And when you look up to the Southern Cross, that is where he went. I mean, that's what they write in their dreaming stories. They make it so obvious that in the end, when you read it, it's not even symbolic. It's straight out. And by the way, remember this, ladies and gentlemen, the creation spirits are not called gods.
No.
They're called sky heroes. So everything about their mythology is not a nebulous being floating in the sky, which exists. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, in this case, there was someone else involved in this, and they came from the Pleiades. That's their story, and we're sticking by it.
Didn't one of them take off in a gigantic tree thing with all smoke? And
Yeah, we spoke about that. Yeah, they did that constantly.
And then
Biami has a landing spot, which is a flat...
it's like a tabletop
mountain where he landed, and they make it clear that he landed. And all this information we're giving you now came from work that Frederick Slater, who was the president of the Australian Archaeological Society, recorded when he broke down the first language and translated it. And he got into a lot of trouble for that.
So do you have a particular story about their initial meeting with the Sky Heroes that impacted you personally on your own beliefs?
Yeah, look, the one we worked with Arnie Bev, and I can't use the last name because she's passed on, and there was a site called Barragara, which is Devil's Rock, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that was where Biami and Duramulin and the nameless one, and Mula Mula, was the first place they stepped after the ship's land. And there you will find a carving of a person wearing a bloody helmet, isn't it, Evan?
Yeah.
And gloves and actual boots. Now, we've got another elder who's told us about a site, which we haven't got to yet, where they have a person, an astronaut, and then have like a triptych where you have him with the astronaut full geared, then the next one, the helmet is off, then the gloves are taken off, then the boots are taken off, and we see what's inside. I mean, they really are trying their hardest to make it pretty damn easy for us to work out. But the problem is, ladies and gentlemen, they have all this information, but we've never, up till now, no one's really won their trust enough to say, okay, we're going to tell you this information, because they just don't trust us. And as you know, if you start talking about this weird little green man and all that sort of Von Däniken stuff, well, you know what that means, don't you? You're in trouble.
Sure. I have a question. During the research that you did for Shunned, I mean, and you've got, again, emphasising over 30 years' worth of information and research and study and investigation with the elders, did anything occur to either one of you, Stephen or Evan, on a personal level to make you sort of rethink everything you knew? I mean, apart from everything that we had already collected, was there anything in particular that made you just think, we have to give everyone's head a wobble because everything has to be rewritten? Is there a particular personal event or anything that you'd like to share about that?
Yeah, look, there's probably about a dozen, to be honest.
I was just running through them. Which one?
The question is not so much, is there one? There are many. And we are talking about, what we're talking about here is something that people might find hard to believe, that when the original people and others from other cultures say they still have magical powers, we're talking about that. And my question is, which one do we pick? Because we have about 6 or 7 to choose from. Well, we've seen things happen that don't fit into any of our traditional notions of law and what. Yeah, look, we'll stick with the Graham Hancock one, Evan. We've got so many to pick from, haven't we?
Yeah.
That's
a good one.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'll give you one, okay? But, I mean, honestly, we could give you half a dozen and we'd still probably only just get worked up to chapter 1. We took Graham Hancock. When he came to Australia, he did a series of talks, and what he did is every spare moment he spent on country with us. We spent 6 days on country with him, but we made a rule, 7 days. If we were going to do that and show him all the special stuff, not just the busman's talk, but a proper stuff, a sacred stuff, he would have to sit with an elder of the old way. That was the rule. Okay, so we took him all over the place, and on the last couple of days we took him down to Carter, which people called Kangaroo Island, but it's actually called Carter, Island of the Dead, blessed those who listen. That's its proper name. It's a sacred place. And he spent some time with an elder of the old way, a Ramangeri elder, Chano Walker. Now, on the last day, we're sitting around the campfire, and the campfire is a massive fire in a pit, and it's surrounded by blue metal gravel, and when you walk on it, you hear the crunkles everywhere. I remember the first day when I was trying to sleep, I could hear people 30 metres away walking on there when I was trying to get to sleep. But anyway, on this second day, we're all sitting around there, and then Kano appears, traditional way, old way, all painted up, white ochre all over, head done up, all covered up, singing. And no one knew he was coming, did he?
No, we were in the middle of making a sandwich, I think, in the dark.
I was making a sandwich in the dark, and I looked up, and there's this black fella looking so like it was 400 years ago. I thought, better leave the sandwich alone. So then we all sit around, and he tells us stuff in language, and then he does a whispering song, doesn't he, Evan? Which is an amazing song. Then he talks sometimes in English to tell us what he's saying, and he gave us some information, which we can't talk about now. And when he's finished, he stepped back one step, and all of us watched him. It's dark, of course. Then he stepped back the second step. And when he stepped back the second time, he disappeared. Now, I can tell you, it's strange, but you can ask Graham Hancock and Santha because they were standing next to us too. And I can tell you Graham's mouth could not have been any wider. It was just agape. He was shocked. And within a second, there he is standing behind Christine, about, 25 metres away?
Yeah, but completely the other side.
On the other side, and he reappeared. And he's there, his big smile on his face, he's talking. And, of course, no one's saying a word because we're all in a state of shock. And I went up to his wife and I said to Christine, Christine, I've seen Kano do some amazing things, but I've never seen that before. You know what she said? Nor have I. And then I asked Kano, I said, what you just did? I said, what's going on there? He said, I belong to both ways.
Old way and new way.
Old way, new way. I go both ways. But that's all he's told us. Now, I can tell you, we've seen this guy do stuff like this on about 4 or 5 occasions. Now we expect it. If someone said this guy can appear and reappear somewhere else, yeah, that's normal. I've sat down with those elders when I was first given ceremony, and I heard them talk. And I heard them talk about one guy that killed his totem, then he reappeared 200 k's away and about 15 people saw him. They spoke about that like we speak about halftime in a football match and what's taken place. They spoke about this all the time as being normal. We think about that. We read that in books and say, I just wonder. Maybe I believe in it, but I can't be sure about that because it sounds so bizarre. We've seen stuff like that so many times now, I think that's normal, right? I mean, another occasion there when we went to a sacred site, Kano called 8 hawks to circle in a figure 8. He called them, and within 2 minutes, 8 hawks, which are not flock animals, flew above the site we're standing in a figure 8. And they did that until he told them to leave. Now, you might think that's not possible. Yeah, but we're dealing with different parameters here, and the people we're dealing with, they never let go of what they had and really adopted what we have. They don't want it. They're okay with where they are. And to be honest, we need to be where they are because what they're talking about, what they can do, that's really what we need to know about. So when these elders speak, we don't. And funny, because when the elders ring, what we normally get, Evan normally gets a message. Don't you, Evan?
Phone now.
From another person to say, I must ring the elder, because the elder will never ring me. And Evan will get a message saying, drop what you're doing, ring straight away. And then what he will do is he'll give a piece of information that's given him by the spirits. And when he's finished, he just hangs up. In fact, a couple of days ago with him, weren't we, Evan?
Yes.
And he said to all of us, about 5 of us, all get together, come together, look at this map. And we all looked at the map, we turned around, get closer. Turned around, he was gone again. Never couldn't see him.
Where did he go?
So it's the same sort of thing. They work on different ways of doing things, but I can tell you one thing. That stuff we read about, telekinesis and all that sort of stuff, it's true. We've seen it all that different stuff. We've seen people do it.
Oh my goodness, all the hair on my arm just stood on end when you talked about that. That was amazing. So you've stepped into another dimension really, and you're coming and going. Have you ever thought at any point that your lives have become so shamanic that now everything that seems not real or not possible is just very normal for you now and it's part of your everyday life?
Yes, but I'll make one proviso to that. Yes, it is part of our everyday life, but we have absolutely no control over it. Right? Like yesterday, I spent some time staring at a snake, which has got the biggest size I've ever seen. I was about 10 centimetres away from it, and it just laid there looking at me. And I went back 2 minutes later and just stayed there looking at me. And it was a wild snake. I felt like I could have picked it up. Now, normally you would think that's not right, but now we're so used to it. But we have no control. I want to make that point. We are we're agreeable to the original way of doing things, but we don't know how it works. It happens. We've no idea why these things take place.
When or...
No, they just happen.
Happens.
Now, with some of the elders, they still know how to make these things happen. And honestly, for God's sake, they're the ones every human should be looking to now, not the politicians and the businessmen. They're not going to help you anymore because they don't care. They don't care about you individually. You've got to go to the shamans like this one. And by the way, there's more than one shaman around. Kano's a lawman, but there's plenty of others there too. They're around, and they're talking about the fact their ways are going to come back. So, yeah, we're just part of a game where the strings are basically on our backs and our shoulder blades and all over and being pulled, and we just go where we're supposed to go. It's easy.
Have the elders ever told you why they chose both you and Evan to become part of this and you know, the messages that they wanted you to give, obviously, about their origins, Pleiadians, everything that's, you know, come to you with all the research you've done over the years? Have they ever said to you why they chose both of you to be part of this and to give all this information to everybody else?
Yeah, to an extent, but let's be clear about the fact. I don't think choose is the right word. I think we're the best of a bad lot. I really don't think. I don't want anyone to think, my God, these guys must be standing on a pedestal somewhere with the clouds wafting all over. No. They had such a piss poor clientele to choose from, and because the archaeologists in our country are so pathetic in how they approach and when they walk onto country, all that we had going for us is we had respect that we knew how to come onto country, and that's all we had. To be honest, to begin with, when we started writing books, we wanted to write about the links between Gnosticism and the dreaming, and that was it. We had no intentions of writing about archaeology at all. We weren't actually so much chosen. The other part of this to bear in mind is that if we turned up 10 years ago, you wouldn't hear from us because the timing wasn't right either. They've told us that this year is the last year where people can choose. This is why they're putting this information out. They want the truth out so that people can look at what the truth is, and if they want to continue accepting the lies they've heard, that's their choice, but they make a choice. So our job is this year to get this information, to get all this archaeology and science, in a white filler way that's palatable to them, and it's still not palatable anyway, but we're trying, and then make people look at the truth and throw it in their own court and let them decide where they go from there. The elders are adamant that next year something of monumental importance will take place in this country and elsewhere too. As to what it is and to what's going to take place, we only have bits of ideas, and unfortunately we're not really allowed to say the bits of ideas, except that basically they needed someone last year and this year. We were around, and as we just heard today, we just heard two of the top people that are working in the district, that are what you call mainstream archaeologists. We've been invited to a site that they both went to, and as the elders said, they just didn't get it. They just got the simple 101 version. Now, these guys have got PhDs and they're highly regarded and everyone thinks highly of them. According to the blackfellas, they just got the kids' version of it. So we've been asked to get the grown-up version of it, which is the important version. Now, we're lucky because now we're in a situation where we've been shown a few things others find out and then they decided that's okay. But we never went onto country ever until I was given ceremony. I never went onto country, and we go onto country and smoke our things ourselves, and we do it traditionally. We go onto country traditionally. We normally take the elder on to smoke us. If not, we'll do it anyway. But we didn't go onto country until I've been given ceremony and been given the right by original people to go onto country and talk about Wurrichin. So we've gone about this differently. We got our degree. Well, I mean, I did a couple of years archaeology in university, but I walked out on that because it was a joke. We got our proper degree, blackfella degree, not whitefella degree, that gives us the right to walk onto country. And because we were given that ceremony first, then that means that maybe a little bit more can be shared with us than the guys who've got their whitefella degree, which earns nothing on blackfella country. It doesn't give you the right to do anything, but they think it does.
And I have a question. When you held the ceremony, what was it like for you personally? What did you come away with on a personal level from that?
It's hard to say because this was I spent days and days and days down there. They called me down there with another person. When it was quite funny because I always walk everywhere with my black folder, don't I, Evan?
Oh, yeah.
It started when he picked up my black folder. He said, "You're not going to need this anymore," and he threw it away. And he looked at me. I looked at him helpless, like, "What am I going to do? I've got a pen without a black folder." Then he gave me a stick, a sacred stick, to hold for an hour. And then after that, then the men got in a circle and they sung traditionally. And then he whispered things in my ear, which I can't repeat. Some of it I knew because it was English. Most of it wasn't. It took a long time, and it was done properly. And what I got out of it was one thing, not so much the ceremony. I spent 3-4 days with these people before that happened. What I worked out was I thought that the old ways were gone. I just thought we were doing history. Then I realised we're not actually doing history, we're doing the future and the present and history, because the original history lines are circular. I learnt what that meant. I watched 5 elders for about an hour, half an hour, discussing how a new word would be said, and argued and discussed how it should be said. Then when a flock of black cockatoos turned up, they said, well, then they've decided that's the way it's going to be said. And I realised then that a lot of the things that I read about the way original people used to live, I realised where I was. They were living in a caravan at the time and they were wearing clothes and stuff. For all intents and purposes, for those 3 days, I left the whitefella world and I went back with them, and back 300-400 years. And there was the cars going past and stuff, but they were still living the old way. And that's what I learned. It's not gone. When living with them and seeing them do the ceremony, then I'm watching them then again. I won't tell you what they did. I watched them do magic again, and it worked. I started to realise all those things that we read about is what we're supposed to be. This is how we're supposed to live. And the last 5,000 years have been a miserable nightmare where everything got changed. The rules got changed. We had money. And then men started to take over and behave badly, and then we started to farm, and then we started to own land, and all the things that have been set up for hundreds of thousands of years fell out the window. And I was watching these guys the old way, and I'm thinking, this way, they've got no computers, they've got no flash screens, they've got no flash toys, they've got no flash cars, but they're living a better way than we are. That's what I figured out. Their way's better than our way.
They're really living, aren't they?
Well, they're living as a group, for God's sake. They're living as a tribe, where the tribe still works as an entity. Everyone's an individual, but they're all still part of something far greater, where as a group, they still have that link to one another, whereas we, whitefellas society now, when it gets dark, we lock our doors up and we stay inside our houses, and then we emerge in the morning again and we go back out into the light. Well, maybe not the light. We go back out into something. For them, I remember we lived in Moree, Evan.
Yeah.
When we first lived in Moree in summer,
that's right.
we lived in a street where there were 2 white people and the rest were regional. We heard this noise when we first got there, and I went outside, and the whole of the street was full of people walking up and down and walking into houses, and everything was open. And I was thinking, my God, I've never seen this before, because the streets at night in whitefella society, nobody walks in them, they drive in them. But there were literally hundreds of people just walking up and down the road talking to each other. And I was thinking, that's not right. They should be hiding inside, locking their houses, locking their doors so that no one gets in. And I started to realise then there's a different way of living than the one we've got. And our way is no good.
That's amazing. What about you, Evan? Did you want to share an experience that you underwent while you had your ceremony?
Well, I guess this one involves me a little bit. I got one of those phone calls that Dad needed to speak to his elder, but for some reason I must have been on Facebook at that stage, and someone had sent me a photo from one of the sites we had been working on, and it was of this rainbow kind of coming out of the site.
Double rainbow.
Double rainbow.
Coming straight out of the site.
Yeah, and she was just driving past and saw it, sent it to me. And Dad's like, oh, well, give me the phone because I have to dial the number for him because he's not great with the technology, so I do that for him. And I said, no, you've got to look at this photo first. I just knew that he had to look at the photo first before he phoned. And he's just like, no, I've got a phone. Like, just look at the photo. So I took the photo and went, oh, great. Yeah, this rainbow is very pretty.
It's coming out of a standing stone site, so what?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then I rang Kano.
Yeah. Then I know the number for you.
Yeah, well, I don't ring anyone, of course. And Kano says, did you feel it? I say, feel what, Kano? He said, from the standing stone site yesterday, 12 o'clock. And that's exactly when Iris took the photograph. He said, we felt it 3,000 k's away. It was an energy surge that came out of the site.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a photograph of it. He said, but you've got evidence of it already, haven't you? And I said, oh, my God, who's pulling the strings here? Yeah. I said, yes, Kano, we have a photograph of it. He said, yes, we knew that. That happens constantly. Yeah. And Evan was involved in that one. And there you are. We've got a photograph light pouring out of this site. And then 3,000 k's away, the elder's telling us, I can feel it. So when I said we're strings, the strings are in the back of our pulling us all the time. There's an example of it.
Yeah,
3,000 k's away. And another occasion there, I went on the site with Evan.
Yes.
And because our elder was sick, we didn't smoke ourselves.
Yeah, we just did
But we did ceremony.
We did a little ceremony we got given about walking onto sites.
And then we get a phone call that night from Kano, 3,000 k's away in South Australia. He said, I've got a kangaroo standing in front of me right now and told me, you went on the country today, didn't smoke yourself, didn't you? I was thinking, oh, God, there's no secrets here. I said, yeah, but we did another ceremony. He said, oh, the kangaroo told me that. That's why they let you go, but don't ever do it again or they'll kill you. And that's how he hung up after that. That was the end of the conversation.
So,
now, how did he know we didn't smoke ourselves that time?
There were only about 3 other people with us and they hadn't spoken.
They hadn't spoken.
We were in the middle of nowhere.
But an owl flew out as we left.
Yes.
And the owl told someone, another animal, and that told the kangaroo, and the kangaroo told someone else. And before you know it, 3,000 k's within a day, that information had got across to Kano. And he said, the big red kangaroo has come to me and told me all this. Now, I'm going to tell you that the kangaroo communicated with Kano. Now, the scientist is going to tell me that's a load of rubbish. That's a load of rubbish. Kangaroos cannot communicate with humans. And I'm going to turn around and say, well, you tell me, how did Kano know that I didn't smoke myself when he was 3,000 k's away and didn't even know we were going on the country that day, did he?
No.
We never told him.
No.
So how did he know we were on country and we didn't smoke ourselves if the owl didn't tell another animal that told the kangaroo? Must have happened. But the scientists would tell us we're wrong. But my head, my logic, and my soul tells me the scientists are wrong. That was told to Kano, and he knew we didn't smoke ourselves. And I can tell you, we've never been on site again. unsmoked. I don't care if it's pouring. We're going to get smoked.
There's fire one way or another. Man, not the biggest fire in the world, but there's definitely smoke and fire.
Everyone who goes on the country must reek of smoke before I let them on again, because the kangaroo will dob me in again, and that's the end of it for me. So this is part of it. You see, when we talk about science in our talks, and we do talk about lots of DNA and
Blood
cranium,
groupings.
blood grouping and stuff like that, we keep throwing in the stuff I'm talking about now, and we tell them, we don't have any choice, because if you want to hear the whole history, you've got to hear both sides. You've got to hear about the fact that those birds come when they're told, that they can communicate with animals. They can disappear when they feel like they want to. That is part of their science, you see. Our whitefella science is all about what I can see, what my senses tell me. Blackfella science is what my soul and my spirit tell me, and I've got more interest in their science than the other one, because our science is weak as water. It never works long, particularly when it runs up against blackfella science, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Always. So whenever we go on country, we always get greeted by birds. No, we haven't.
Yeah.
3 birds. 3 birds each time they come, they see us off. How's that happen? Same rules. We're being watched on country by the spirits and by the birds who work with spirits, who work with people. It's a link that we have to understand. Until we do, we don't really get their story.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't begin to explain how I feel just listening to you both talk. It's remarkable. I wanted to ask you both something, which you can both answer, or either. Did you find any? This is one thing that I've wanted to ask for a long time, actually. Were there any variations within the same, like, dream time stories that were shared with you? Any particular one that you felt, I guess, was the most significant in relation to the work that you were doing with the elders?
Yeah, I can think of one. It's the obsession that every tribe has with our tribe is where humanity began.
Oh, yeah, I see where you're going. No, it's us.
Yeah.
No, it's us.
No, it's us. It's quite funny. I'm going to tell you now, it's not a matter of did humanity begin in Australia. We've gone past that now. The claim is, they're all claiming ownership for the first spot. Let me give you an example of how strong this is. Auntie Bev told us that when she was young, she just passed on recently and she was 80, and when she was young, she used to sit on the top of the elders, the old ones who knew the old way, and they told them a story. And the story was that it began in Darkingon country, didn't it, near Gosford, and that all of the worlds were joined together. And they were separated by 8 plates that went off in different directions, and Australia stayed in the centre, and all the other ones floated away. Now, I find that fascinating because plate tectonics and plate theory came into existence in the 1960s and 70s. Yet there she is sitting on the shoulders of these old men and women talking about plate tectonics before we bloody even knew about it, and speaks of 8 plates. Now, Auntie Bev will tell you the 8 plates, and of course Gosford was where it all came away from.
Yes.
Then we come up to the Bundjalung Confederation of 13 tribes, and they will all tell you that it began there. When we go down to Carter, they will tell you, and I've got an inclination to believe that it might have even begun in Kangaroo Island. That's their call. When I went across to West Australia, they will tell you that it began at their place at Port Hedland. What I find funny in this, and I mean, we just stand back. I've actually been there when we was in 2 tribes saying, no, it began here. And
it's me, and this is why. It's mine. Yeah.
What I learned from that, it doesn't really matter whether it began in Gosford, whether it began in Byron Bay, whether it began in Wilpena Pound or Kangaroo Island. The thing, they're fighting over the insignificant part of the story. What is understood with every tribe is it begins in this country. That's what they all get together, don't they? Yep. That's the one thing we've noticed. We stand back when these fights take place and let them fight over who has first ownership of the scraps. But what we do know is there's not one original person who's ever told us that they came from Africa. They find that concept insulting. And look, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out where the first country was, go and read the Genesis. Read the Garden of Eden and read the tricks for the Garden of Eden, and it'll tell you straight away it's Australia. Let me share this with you. 3 things. Number 1, Adam and Eve were naked, and they were banished, and they wore clothes when they were banished from paradise. Everyone was naked until the white fella came in this country. No one wore clothes. Secondly, Cain and Abel were banished because one farmed the land and one caged animals. In Australia, you cannot farm the land and you cannot cage animals, and if you do, you're banished from this country. This is a story. In the dreaming, man was made from the dust of the ridges. In the Old Testament, we're made from the dust. In the dreaming, we have the tree of knowledge. Have you heard of that story in the Old Testament? Did you know, to begin with, Balaam wanted all of his creations to be vegetarian and wept when humans killed an animal during a great drought as opposed to flood? If you read the Old Testament, you will find in the first 4 pages they've stolen 5 different dreaming stories. What it tells me, I don't care whether you look in the genes, if you look in the religion, you're going to find they'll all talk about a place of paradise where the gods were equal with creation. This is Australia. You see, in our tree of knowledge, it's evil because the snake is there. In the original tree of knowledge, the snake is the purveyor of wisdom. In fact, in the tree of knowledge, everyone came to this tree to get fire to light their fire sticks. So every tribe would meet at this tree and discuss and liaise and create peace and understanding. Because they all had to get father of all tribes. Yeah. So you see, all those stories we read about, you know, the Adam's rib. No, it was Balaam's bloody foot, for God's sake. It wasn't Adam's rib creating Eve, because in our dreaming story, man and woman were created equal. Unlike the Bible one where they ruined it. So if you go back to the beginning of everything, you find it here. So when you look at the mythology, it's a description of Australia. And which was the last continent to lose that pristine original lifestyle? It was Australia, the last one to go under and the first one to come back out the other side. That's how it works.
Mm-hmm. No, that's amazing. That's true, though. I mean, there's a lot of information in the Bible that just, well, to me personally, just doesn't fit. And just remembering from when I used to go to school in Sydney, when we did Aboriginal studies and we looked at the Dreamtime stories and started to compare notes, that's when I started to sort of wake up to the reality of what we were being taught in school and what, you know, the real story was, coming from that beautiful country we come from. And I thought back then even that, you know, everything that was being shown to us was well, pretty much a lie. And I'm just so glad that you, both of you, along with the elders and everyone who's worked with you, has been able to start to open up people's eyes to the truth. And then I guess the rest of the information and the way people interpret it is up to them. And, you know, if they have questions, I'm sure that, you know, they can always ask and, you know, research a bit more on their own. But, I mean, at least you've done the right thing and taken that step to allow us to, I guess, have the truth told to us, just as you have in your presentation of the greatest story never told, which we'll speak about again in the second hour along with Bruce. But I think it's remarkable, and I really want to congratulate you up until now for everything that you've done and everything that you've presented to us and everything that you've told us, Stephen and Evan.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure.
That's what we're here for.
Doesn't hurt to tell the truth, does it?
That's right.
Yeah, I know it's a difficult task and it's very daunting, and you must have been really worried, I guess, at one point when your books went from history to spiritual, and sort of, you know, adding that element of, you know, the sky heroes and the Pleiadians and starting to get into topics that were very different to what you were used to writing. And I think you're very brave for doing that.
Well, we don't have a choice, and it's worth bearing in mind that unlike others who came into this show actually pushing the alien agenda, we came onto this show not even talking about the alien agenda. You can read our first 3 books. There's not one word in UFO there. So we've come at it from a different point of view. We didn't come at it to prove anything. We just came at it because we have no choice. So, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, you've just got to... And remember this too. Everyone agrees the original culture is the oldest culture on this planet. We can argue over the years. I think it's much older than anyone believes. It is the oldest culture on this planet. But you've got to remember something else. Every other continent has been invaded, and people have taken country, they've taken stories, they've realigned the history to suit their sins, absolve their sins. There's only one country on this planet when there was warfare, you could never walk onto the other person's country and steal anything or take anything, and that's Australia. So when we talk about the fact that Australia has the longest continuous history, you better factor this into it. It is the only country where the history wasn't bastardised by another group coming in and taking part of the country and then rewriting history to sanitise that. This is the country where the history was memorised word for word from generation to generation, and nobody come onto that country to change it. So when we look at their stories, we can look at their stories, and if you look at them properly, you're going to realise, my God, they've just told us our whole history. It's there. It's there. I mean, it's a beautiful story called First Man, First Woman. And it's where first man and first woman meet one another, and they decide together as a group that they'll become partners. But there's something missing. There's something missing that only woman can understand when she gets sudden insight when she goes to the tree. And she is the one who realises they can conceive and make babies. This is what the wisdom is. We can create ourselves. So therefore, at that point on, woman decides how the whole show goes. She becomes the creator and the man becomes the facilitator. Ladies and gentlemen, we lost that point. We should still be there. Women had the insight to begin with. They're more powerful in original magic than men.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have to go back to that at some point. We're going to take a short break now.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Just a reminder that Inception Radio Network is on Twitter. Follow us at I_R_N and keep up to date about who's on tonight, what interviews they'll be doing, who's guest spotting, what topics they'll be covering. Tweet to us, tweet about us, retweet topics to your friends, and most importantly, never miss a great show again. That's I_R_N.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Psst, are you looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry. IRN's new interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN chat lounge, the game lounge, video lounge, or the mood lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live skywatches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless. Use your time wisely, keeping it all on IRN.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Hi, can you hear my voice? Imagine how many other people can hear it too. If you have advertising needs, then look no further. The Inception Radio Network currently has openings for on-air advertisements and radio show sponsorships. Given any thought to your target demographic? Inception has you covered there too. Advertising on a network gives you multiple opportunities to advertise on a wide variety of radio show broadcasts, and we have one to fit every advertising need. You know, in recent years, internet radio has exhibited a phenomenal listener growth. An Arbitron Edison survey shows that online radio boosts at least 33 million unique visitors each week and 54 million each month. And that number amazingly continues to grow. And these listeners are a part of many businesses' core demographics. And surveys have shown that internet radio listeners are far more likely than regular radio listeners to spend money on a whole range of activities. You know, internet listeners vote, they dine out and eat fast food, and they grab a cup of coffee. And here's the interesting one. They buy items online at a much higher rate than all other market segments combined. Internet radio also enables businesses to connect with consumers during work hours, where increasingly more lifestyle decisions are being made. Advertise with the best. The Inception Radio Network offers competitive advertising rates to fit just about anyone's advertising budget. Stop by today at www.inceptionradionetwork.com or call us toll-free at 1-888-919-2355. Get the word out. Get results with the Inception Radio Network.
EPIC is Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council, the forum for scholars, experts, and those fascinated by and involved in the study of ancient civilizations, conspiracies, cryptozoology, ETs, and UFOs, fringe science, the paranormal, and all manner of extraordinary phenomena. Please join EPIC as we examine the mysteries of the world and beyond on epicvoyagers.com. And for updates on the upcoming interactive video presentations, the latest news and discussion on the EPIC forum, as well as research, investigations, and membership opportunities. Epic Voyages program schedule is on the Inception Radio Network. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, welcome back to the show. Bruce stepping in, of course, to take over from Danny. But it's good to have you guys on. I've been listening to the show so far, and it's been really interesting. So hopefully we can pick up where Danny left off. I've got a few questions as well, of course. One of the ones that sort of came to mind whilst you were talking was just if you could give us, I guess some of the most unforgettable moments in the research for your book, for obviously the most recent book there, Shunned. What really sort of stands out to you from the research process?
Right. Well, the problem is we've got to think back to Shunned a bit, but for me, I suppose the part that stands out the most in that book is that there's a continuity in the genetic story that is so obvious I get quite annoyed about the fact that we even have to talk about it. If I can give you one example of that, one of the things we write in that book, Bruce, is we write about the fact that after Wilson and Cairn made their revolutionary retraction, that what actually took place in Australia is we've got what's called the Commonwealth Serum Laboratory in Australia, which makes all the vaccines. And the head of that department got a hold...
Roy Simmons, wasn't it?
Roy Simmons, yeah. Got a hold of 1,500 vials of blood. Now, when Wilson came, he got 31 vials of blood and got 22 different variations or mutations, right? Now, we knew that's the greatest. That's 70% greatest in the world. But it's only 31 vials of blood. That could be an amazing accumulation of all the variation within those 31. You need larger amounts to really be definitive. And we did have that because Simmons got a hold of blood that was collected by Norman Tyndale and Joseph Birdsall, two well-known archaeologists. It was collected between 1926 and 1972. And they got 600 vials of blood of full descent Aboriginal people. Now, from that, Simmons examined it and was looking for a link to Africa or India. That was his expectation. That's what he wanted to find, and that's his job. That's what they wanted him to find. This is what he said. He said, I found no link to any other group on the planet. Nowhere. Nothing. And he went further and said, this is much older than African. Now, I would have thought after saying that, Commonwealth Serum Laboratory, they do this sort of stuff all the time. They pulled out their head person. He said, it's not African and it's older than African. And then what happened was after we said that, it just disappeared. They didn't talk about it anymore. What we found, and that's why we did Shunned first before we start talking about all the amazing archaeology we've got, Shunned's job is to clean our heads up because most of us have been to school. Now, you've got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually a school teacher. I've been a principal. I've been executive in primary school and high school. Schooling is about memory, not thinking. You were never taught to think in high school, and you're not taught to think at all in high school, and a little bit in primary school. And you were told that these things are true, but you were never asked to challenge them or think about why they're true. You were just told they are true. So when we see that the science is so clear-cut that the original people are not related to anyone else on the planet and their story is true, yet there it is. It's not hard for us to find. All we're doing is collecting the information. I find it sad that no one found it before us. I think that's the saddest part of this book. It's not as if we've discovered something wasn't hidden. I mean, for God's sake, I remember reading in the Daily Telegraph, which is one of our Murdoch press papers in Australia, over 15 years ago. They said, they found the Aboriginal people in America. It was on page 2. There was 2 paragraphs and about 50 words. That was it. That was it. We went to the South Australian Museum, didn't we, Evan?
Mm-hmm.
And we found, hidden underneath a table with no writing whatsoever, a cast of a creation of a carved crocodile, a saltwater crocodile that's dated at 80,000 years bare minimum. Now, we found it in the museum, stuck underneath a table, and it was a cast with no paperwork, nothing. And we pulled it out and the elder showed us. And the lady said, yeah, bring it out and have a look at it. But nobody knew what it meant. You see, if you looked at it, you wouldn't know what it was. You think, oh, that's interesting. That must have been done 100 years ago. No, it was done 80,000 years ago. So what did the museum do? They're showing it to people. They're not hiding it, are they, Evan?
No.
But they're not giving you any information to know what it means. It sounds to me like, and I don't want to use the horrible C word, conspiracy, but there's something wrong here. There's something like that. They know. And by the way, when I say 80,000 years, that date was given by Josephine Flood, who has sold more books on traditional archaeology than any other archaeologist in this country. That's the date she gave, not us.
But not forgetting also what's next to the engraving. Was that the series of weird symbols?
Oh, yes, yeah, the language, because the original people had a language. You see, in 1937, the world expert on Aboriginal language was Frederick Slater. He was the head of the Australian Archaeological Society. He was an expert on the Aboriginal language of 16 letters. A, E, I, O, and U. You might think are English. They're not. They're original. We actually have a carving with the letter A, don't we?
Yep. Well, the German missionaries in WA, when Klatsch went there, talked about how they were speaking German.
Yeah, when Klatsch went there in 1902, the missionaries said, we don't understand why the Aboriginal people are speaking our German. We can speak to them in German. They understand it. They then deduced that these Aboriginal were the most heinous of all, and they were banished from the Tower of Babel when we all spoke the same language, and they were banished to the worst outpost in South-West Australia. But what they did notice was, my God, the German is exactly the same as us. And you'll find that all languages, and there are bits and pieces of Hungarian and Latin here, we've got pages and pages of words that are straight out in other languages, come from this country. That's what we find amazing. So Shunned is about that. The facts, the real facts, we want to put them together. And people are going to say, oh, that can't be right. It's not us. I keep telling people when we talk about this, it's not our work. We don't know how to break down a mitochondrial DNA and analyse it, do we?
No.
God, we wouldn't even know what it looked like, to be honest.
All we've done is we've got data from different disciplines, different types of academia.
Yeah, and put them together.
And had a view that isn't tunnel vision.
Mm.
We're not looking at one thing. We're trying to look at a global picture, and we've been able to piece these things together.
And it makes a global picture. It makes a perfect picture, and it makes sense. And what we've done is we've put together, I mean, you take America right now. In America, Dr. Walter Neves has 55 Aboriginal skulls he's collected out of 265 skeletons. These are all dated at over 10,000 years. Well, I got a question for you. What are they doing there? We thought that the Indians came from America or France or something about 10,000 years ago, but no. There were people there well before that, now original. Now, we're getting dates now from Lake Valsequilo of original presence in America that goes back 690,000 years, 250,000 years, with some of the best geology on the planet. Now, these are all facts. We write about Lake Valsequilo. We write about the fact that they found these dates, and they are original people. It's all around the world. But the problem is that all this information appears in the media for a day, but no one comments on it, and then they get rid of it. If I can give you one more, Bruce, we've just discovered, you know of our dingo. We've got a dog here called the dingo.
Okay.
Well, it's not a dog.
Okay. Yep.
but it's not a wolf. It's not a dog or a wolf. We've just done genetic studies on it, and they've found the dingo is not related to any dog or wolf on the planet. Well, I got a question for you. Where'd it come from? Because everyone told me when I did archaeology at uni, the dingo is related to a dog from the south of India. That was told to all of us. We were all taught that. We knew that. Oh, yeah, come to the south of India. Now, the latest study that was done by Sydney Uni, by 5 of the top geneticists in the planet, have found that the dingo is not related to any animal on this planet. Well, then, where do I look? And you take the other one, the oldest mitochondrial study is WLH3. They dragged out some mitochondrial DNA from his finger, and they found that it's a Homo sapien, and the genes do not relate to anyone on this planet. I want to repeat that. Nobody. Not even African. Forget the Africans. They're out of the equation. But nobody else. Now, what they then said was, oh, it's an extinct gene. Yes, it's Homo sapien, but it's an extinct gene. They're making that up because they want it to relate to somewhere else, and it doesn't. What it should do, because it's 60,000 years old, this skull, it should relate exactly to the time the Africans got off the boat, because they're supposed to get here 50 to 60,000 years ago. There's not a one African gene in the whole damn thing. So we know these things are true. So what we're doing with Shunned is, before we talk about the archaeology, we need to clear up all the damage and all the lies that we were told about the way history comes together. The second thing we found is it is not in a continuous upward straight line that reaches the pinnacle of society, which is today. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there were civilizations here that were earlier, and in some cases, I'm going to say this now, more advanced than ours, are more aware than ours. We are not the peak. We are in the opposite. It might look pretty on the outside, but inside it's rotten. We're in a trough. So that's what we found. So Shunned is basically letting people know, if you've got mitochondrial DNA hang-ups, we'll get rid of them. If you're Y chromosome, you're not sure about that, we'll get rid of that. If you want to look at skull morphology, we'll do all of that science. And then we'll spend some time looking at religion too. We do that in Shunned also. And at the end of it all, you'll realise it doesn't matter what you look at, it all starts in Australia. So that's what that book is trying to do, is to try and give some empirical background to clean up all the baggage that we were taught in the schools about how humanity dragged themselves out of the caves and slowly evolved from Homo something to Homo something to Homo erectus and on to Homo sapien. That's a lie. We're now pretty well damn sure that we did not come from Homo erectus anyway. And as for what made us, nobody knows. Nobody knows.
One thing there that sort of stands out to me is that in the past, as we go back to the Victorian era, when it came to examination of human origins, I mean, the subject was often charged with the problem of, racism intrinsic to the way of thinking of the science. But today, I mean, looking at where you're at here, a kind of choice between the Australian Aboriginals or, the African people, I mean, we essentially talk about two groups of black people. So, I mean, that at least removes the racism aspect from this, to a degree. But it makes me wonder, why do you feel that there is such an aversion to the idea of us stemming from Australian people rather than African? It's saying that, there's no longer that bias towards it being an Asian or a white person. You know what I mean? What is it do you feel that makes people still wish to stick with the Africans? What's the underlying benefit, I guess, to the system, if you like, in your opinion? Because it just seems that, we no longer have that thing that is trying to prove that it's white people. It's simply a choice between two different groups of black people. So, I mean, I wonder why is there this, intrinsic problem?
We sort of got that. It was a bit tricky because you echoed a bit, but I think we did pick up what you're on about. The reason I think why there's a real issue about saying, no, it's not Africa, it's Australia, is because if you accept Australia, there's two pieces of baggage that come with the Australian story that are not locked into the African story. And I think both those pieces of baggage are a real issue. And I'll need to explain both of them. The first one is this. According to the original people, the whole world lived under the auspices of the dreaming. They sailed out from Australia. They exported their genes, they exported their astronomy, they exported their democracy, they exported gender equality, they exported all the things that make us noble human beings. And we all lived under that baggage, under those conditions till 5,000 years ago. This is part of what happened. It's not just the fact that they went to other countries. I'll tell you what they did. Now, what that then means is, what they're saying is that up until 5,000 years ago, humanity, until we farmed, it might have been 6, might have been 7, around that time when the farming kicked in, we all lived the same way. And we were spirit. Now, here's the trick. We didn't fight. If we did fight, it was controlled. We basically lived each day to be spiritual human beings. And our role was to be cooperative spiritual human beings. But the last 5,000 years, we're told we're naturally used to fighting, killing, fighting each other. They've created a paradigm that goes with the African story because it's so clean. You can just do what you want to it. This one has baggage with it. It has the baggage of the fact that until 5,000 years ago, everyone, their whole life was devoted to the spiritual. All of us, all around the world, were living the same general lifestyle where we tried to reach the spiritual every day. But the second piece of baggage that comes with the Australian story is, I'm sorry, you have to throw the word Pleiades in, and they don't want to do that. Because if we're going to say that humanity began in Australia, let's go back to what Professor Alan Wilson said. And this is what Rebecca Cann said, and it's also what Vandenberg did when he did a study of the Y chromosomes of original people. All three of them said that the original people evolved from 2 lineages. That comes from Rebecca Cann's study of the Y chromosome, and it comes from Vandenberg's study of Rebecca Cann's study of the mitochondrial DNA and Vandenberg's study of the Y chromosome.
Here we go. The Australian Aborigines arose 400,000 years ago from 2 distinct lineages, far earlier than any other racial type.
Okay, now here's the problem. They say that one of them was Homo sapiens sailed to this country. All right, I'll put up with that as a possibility because that makes it easier for them. Who's the second hominid that sailed to this country? They've never said there was another one. So my question becomes, you say there's 2 lineages, and they say there are 2 lineages. They both say it. One they say is Homo erectus. They will not give us a second one because they don't have one. Now, if we're going to go down that path and we look at that, and Wilson says it, Cann says it, Vandenberg says 2 lineages, one's Homo erectus, we ask the original people because they were here. You know what they're going to say? They're going to say the Pleiadian lineage. Can you see the problem there? Because if we wanted to walk down their path and accept it as right, we've got to start listening to them. And they're going to start saying, as on top, so below, and they're going to start looking above and pointing to the Pleiadians and say, like I had an elder that rang me, Jerry, I can't say his last name because he's passed on too, and he would finish every conversation with the same thing. Don't forget, my grandmother told me my ancestors are Pleiadian. Now, I don't know that they really want to hear that story. Wouldn't it be better to stick with, some people wandered out of Africa 60,000 years ago and made their way to Australia, and they wandered out of other places, and we're all in caves then, and then slowly we become more sophisticated. And around 5,000 years ago, we became very sophisticated and started beating the crap out of each other and blowing each other up. That's what they want us to know. What if that's all a pack of lies? Well, they've invested so much time and effort. Well, look at today, ladies and gentlemen. 50 cents in every dollar is spent on protecting ourselves from someone who wants to kill us or us killing someone else. And we say, well, that's the way we are. No, we're not. It's a lie. So they need to keep that lineage as part of that history that keeps together a lie that's made up on things that aren't true. If you want to acknowledge Australia, as a part, then go to the scientists and they'll tell you 2 lineages. If you want to throw Homo erectus in, you can. But I want to know what the other lineage is because that's the cracker, isn't it? That's the real key to this equation. And I don't believe the other lineage, from what we've seen, and we've seen it written on caves where they said it was genetic manipulation. So we're inclined to think, yeah, Wilson, Cann, Vandenberg, you're all right. 2 lineages, you're right. One of them probably is Homo erectus. You didn't give a second one, did you? And you know why none of them gave a second one? Because they couldn't think of one. But if they'd done what we did, which is go and ask the elders, they'd just tell you straight away. As on top, so below. Up there, look at the Pleiades. That's where our people come from. That, I think, Bruce, is the problem. Because if you take part of their story, you can't take a bit of it. It's all or nothing. Yes, we know that the oldest mitochondrial DNA in this country doesn't relate to anyone else. So we'll make up a story and say it's an extinct gene. Yeah, we know that. Oh, we also just found out now that all birds, all songbirds, don't come from Europe. They come from Australia. There's a pattern emerging here. Everything's coming from Australia. The songbirds we know of, we were all told 20 or 30 years ago, no songbirds come from Australia. They flew here from other countries. Now they've got it all wrong. Oh, my shit. Once again, they're all coming from Australia first. So we've got humans starting in Australia. We've got the dogs starting in Australia. Maybe the dingo's the beginning of all dogs, the other way around. We've got all the birds coming from Australia. When does it stop? That's the story we seem to be picking up here.
The real question is, what didn't start here?
What didn't start in Australia? We know that fish began in Australia. We know this is the oldest land. It's a combination of stories. This is the beginning place, as the elders tell us.
That's a pretty good answer. Yeah, I mean, I can understand why, that it's such a pain for the mainstream really to accept that other narrative, because, as you say, it brings in a lot of uncomfortable subjects which they don't have to face if we just stick with Africa. Even though, as you show in Shunned, it's quite painfully obvious, really, that the evidence is all pointing towards Australia.
Yes.
And was there some reason that you know of then that this additional blood sampling and genetic material sampling was never done? I mean, after they discovered, of course, that there was a higher level of mutation in original DNA, and the blood types were different. I mean, was there a reason why the scientists involved at that point didn't sort of say, okay, can we organise a larger study? I mean, do you know why that didn't happen, or is that sort of conspiratorial?
Oh, that C word again. Yeah, we sort of do know why, because we dealt with it today when we started working with the rocks, because the rocks are freaking them out so much, and we've got this attitude as let's not touch this. But it comes down to this. There are limited postings and limited jobs for academics in this country, right? Now, look, I'll give you an example. On one occasion, we tried to break into one of the universities and explain what we're doing. And we told them about one of the sites we're working on, and everyone was very interested until I got to the Chancellor's office, the Vice-Chancellor's office. I call her the Ice Maiden, because all of a sudden there was a gust of cold air that went over everything. It's very simply this. They just do not want this out. And they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that it doesn't come. I mean, we've had our stuff up on the National Australian News, taken off within 2 hours of it going up because they didn't want it up. I'm working right now with a Murdoch Press paper that swears they're going to write about the rocks we're doing, and has written back 3 times to say, hang tight, I'm going to get it up there. This paper is so far right-wing it isn't funny, and it's one of Murdoch's favourite press, isn't it, Evan?
Oh, it would be his favourite.
It's the far right-wing press in Australia. There is, I'm not going to use the word conspiracy, but there is something going on where whatever we try and do to get into mainstream, they are actively working against to get this up. But the problem is we have something they don't like. We have hard evidence. We have proper evidence when we've played them at their own game. We've written, as you know, many scientific papers have been published around the world because we can beat them at their own crummy game, because I'm going to tell you something about their science. It's not that clever. I want to tell you something about archaeologists. They dig holes and make drip lines. That's about it. I did 3 years of archaeology and walked out. I hadn't failed the course when I walked out. I walked out because I had a site they wouldn't accept. But I know what archaeology is about, and I'm going to tell you now, of all the science, it is the one that has the least skill. I'm quite happy to say that, because an archaeologist, when they freak out and don't know what the date is, they send it off to a geologist or a chemical analysis, and they'll give an answer and they'll come back and get the answer. They don't have to work it out, do they?
No.
They dig a hole. And I think, isn't this a wonderful hole I've dug? Well, I can tell you now, it is a nice hole, and it's very nicely dug. But you don't need to do 4 years in uni to work out how to dig a hole. I can tell you, it's not that bright. And I can say it because I did 3 years of their damn course. I did pure archaeology and walked out, so I know what they're on about. There's nothing clever here. I can tell you now, when we use America, we're using fission track zircon, fission tracking, we're using tetrahydration, we're using uranium series, we're using all of the best science, standing behind science. And then the Americans just say, no, the Aboriginals didn't come here. They're defending a theory that was written with ink and quill. We're fighting for science. And it's funny, we have probably one of the top geologists in the world. We've got quite a few really highly qualified geologists who are backing us. Because one of them doesn't even believe in all our theories, does he?
No.
But he believes in our science. And he tells people when he contacts the Smithsonian, I believe what they're saying, but they're science. And we make this point too. You may not agree with our opinion, but you have to accept one thing. The science we have doesn't fit into your opinion, so we've got to start again. Do people want to start again when they just wrote a paper that got them a posting at a university and we're saying that everything you wrote is wrong? No, they don't want to do that. And that is the problem. We're basically saying that all the academics are wrong. All. I don't really want to hear that. Now, some do, because a good academic, a really good academic, should be the one that writes proudly, I made a mistake. I was wrong, and now I can see what is right. Now, that's a good academic. These guys aren't good academics in this country. They don't want to admit anything. So the best idea is basically ignore us or swear at us. Or, if we're lucky, we'll get a death threat, won't we, Evan?
Oh, yeah, they're fun as well.
Yeah, we get death threats too. But either way...
With official letterheads, mind you.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to get you. You've done nothing wrong, but I want you to know that I'm watching you.
Yeah, and I'm going to kill you.
I'm going to get you if I can.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's all part of the same dressing, but the truth is this, that all we're trying to do is pass on a story that is hundreds of thousands of years old, and we've had the privilege to be able to hear the story as it was originally told. Now, if you don't want to listen to it, that's cool. It's all right. Go and read your other stories. Go and watch your movies if you wish. But remember one thing. Once you know about it and you look away, you've made a decision. And the elders have told me, all we have to do is to make people listen. If they don't want to take it in, it's not our problem anymore. So we just keep banging our head against a brick wall, and one day soon we're going to draw blood. That was scary.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand the underlying problem you have when obviously there's so many people that have built their careers on what is really a pack of lies. I mean, they may well have, in fairness, believed those to be truths. So I'm not going to say that every scientist that's on the wrong side of this, is there because of malicious reasons. But they may well have, of course, believed what they were taught at university and all the rest of it. But then when they realise later on, that that's the case, it can be very difficult to sort of admit that and know that you're going to lose, your excellent salary or whatever it is, you're respecting the community and all the rest of it. So there is that problem, isn't there? That they kind of build themselves up a kind of a house of cards, I suppose, and that now the gale is blowing around them.
Well, that's true, and you've got to remember in this country right now, they've cut back severely in funding science, massively so, that about half the people working for the CSIRO are working for free. They're not being paid anymore. So what that actually does, it's very clever. It means the scientists who do have a posting, they're not going to rock the boat, are they? They're not going to say something radical, really obscene and out there. They're going to try and keep within the mainstream to keep their posting going. Because I do know, I mean, I would say roughly half of the scientists who were working 15 years ago have been laid off in this country. We're laying off scientists and academics en masse. So the ones who are left, do you really think they're going to join our team? I mean, honestly, we've got quite a few people. We can say there's a hand on our heart. Some of the top academics in this country are backing us, but know damn well if their name was placed near theirs, they would lose their job. And we're not joking about that. We know that is an absolute fact. They will lose their job if their name is placed next to us. So we know that people know we're right. And we know others know we're right and they don't want to talk to us. But all of them are under the same system where they're putting out their hand to the government saying, pay me, and the government certainly don't want to back us. So it's an interesting situation we're in at the moment. It's called banging your head against a brick wall.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's been quite fascinating, I think, having sort of collaborated with you. And then a lot of what I've learned from you has kind of come back around in my own experience, especially with some investigations over here in Latin America, in Ecuador, that having been to a site where, artifacts found on site in the jungle, in an area that shouldn't be anything. But some of the artifacts were identical to pieces that I'd seen, referenced by you guys, and also pieces in Bosnia, and now with your latest work on the stones, you're showing a link to Bosnia anyway. And then we're seeing the same over here, stones that link to Bosnia and to Australia. And again, as you say, it always seems it loops back around to Australia wherever you look.
Well, that's an important one too. I'm glad you brought that up. I'd actually forgotten about that. Thanks, mate. We actually wrote an article with the people researching the Bosnian period. Now, what they found was a rock that had about 20 markings, of which 15 were able to measure. And then we compared them to the rock we call Rosas Rock 1 from Australia. And of the 15 angles, some are 13.66 degrees. Of the 15 angles on the Bosnian rock, we found 14. We could tick off if we compared them to what we had on Rosas Rock 1. Now, that's a 93% match-up between two rocks that are separated by about 10,000 k's. And as you said, we then compared to one in Calgary in Canada, in America. And of the 21 angles that were marked on that, 19 can be found on Rosas Rock 1 and 2. So that means now, when we talk about an ancient language, we've got proof. We got proof. It's too much of a coincidence for those angles to be exactly the same. It's too difficult to convince me that 13.66 can be found on 3 rocks spread by 10,000 k's and it be anything other than intentional. And now what we've got to remember is Rosas Rock 1 has got to be at least 6,000 to 10,000 years old as a bare minimum because of where it was found under the surface, which means we've got an ancient form of communication that spans the planet that they all used that we can't break down today because it's too complex and too difficult for the pedestrian minds of today to even break down. You've got to understand something, ladies and gentlemen. The people who did this were far more intelligent. I know this might sound a bit disappointing for some of us. I know that we watch lots of reality shows and we get very intelligent learning all this, but far more intelligent than we are today. And I know that Dr. Derek Cunningham has been working on this for the last 15 years, is trying to break the code, but I'm going to tell you now, he won't break the original code. It's too smart for us. We need someone way smarter than what we've got collected on this planet to break it down. So, yeah, we know that exactly the same markings can be found around the world. We know it's a shared communication. We know the technology. Most of the technology's only been in existence in the last 50 to 100 years and some hasn't been in existence yet. All that we know is true. So what does that tell us about our past? It tells us that what we got in our books today is an outrageous lie. And it's funny because we all hinted around this word, haven't we? You've used it a few times too, that conspiracy word.
Yes.
I don't know. It's really hard. I mean, it could be just communal, institutionalized ignorance. It could be that. It could be the fact that they're conditioned so they can't see anymore. I'm not sure. But sometimes I do wonder, I've got to be honest, and when we get taken off national media, you start to wonder what's going on here. Because we knew on one occasion, we were the second item in for the national news about 3 years ago. It was taken off every radio station. There were hundreds within an hour. Well, we were told only the government could do that. So you sort of wonder. And that's what's really the sad part of this story. I mean, I know one time we went out there and we basically wore a red T-shirt out in the bush, kilometres from anywhere. Helicopters circled us 9 times. Didn't it ever? Just kept going around and around and around. You sort of feel like, oh, God, I don't want to use the word conspiracy, but, geez, come on. There's too many things going on here. But we won't use it, Bruce. We're not going to use that word. We're going to say institutionalised ignorance of the highest order, and that's a compliment.
Yeah, and I think that probably does account for at least for the greater part of the problems faced. I mean, of course, there's always I suppose for every intellectual on the side of, progress, there's always going to be some of those, of course, on the other side of the fence who do understand but have some nefarious reasons. And whether that's, you'd say, a conspiracy or simply a vested self-interest that causes them to not want that change, we can kind of understand. Yeah. And then, of course, the amount of ignorance around them, which strengthens that position. So I suppose there's an unofficial collaboration between the stupidity and those with the selfish interest, so that they kind of help each other without realising it. I mean, one of the things, sorry, that I'll just move on to a little bit onto one of the actual objects that you've been talking about lately, which was the crystal skull. I mean, that's something that's really fascinated people. So I hope you don't mind me diverting you towards that one, because it's it's really fascinating. Could you talk a bit about?
Yeah. Look, we don't want to talk about it, but we do. Actually, we've mentioned it, and we started every time we mention it by saying with the greatest reluctance. Look, I got to tell you, we've had people in our group that have been talking about crystal skulls in Australia for quite some time too. That come to mind, have been on about for quite some time, and every time I tolerated them. I didn't want to upset them and tell them it's a ridiculous concept, because it is. It's utterly ridiculous to have it. The concept of crystal skull in Australia is a stupid idea. But unfortunately, as much as I'd like to say it, and honestly, I didn't want to go near it. What do we got there? This is what we've got. Now, my biggest issue, I look at this from an archaeological viewpoint. My biggest issue with the skulls, and I don't want to upset people about this, but with the exception of one other skull, there was some chance there might be something to that. Every other skull is never going to get a tick, ladies and gentlemen, because I need to know about when it was found, where it was found, and its situation in situ. If you bring it to me and say, I found it somewhere, or someone gave it to me, I'm going to turn around and say, well, someone could have made it for you. And I'm sorry, because we can't date crystal skulls that well at all. That's how it stands. But that being the case, this lady rang us and says, yes, she said she had a crystal skull, to which I originally thought, oh, God, here's another one. This one's going to the bottom of the stack, isn't it, Adam?
Oh, yeah.
No, we're not going to worry about it. Yeah, but I'll listen to you. Okay, tell me your story. And off she goes and tells me the story. And it sounded quite convincing, and she sounded a good person. And I suppose it was more because she sounded a good person, we decided we'd go up there to see her. And we saw it. And, yeah, look, it was probably the most artistic crystal skull we've seen. And we looked them up.
Quite elaborate.
Oh, yeah. Look, it's even got the suture lines of the skull. It's got two pieces of skull that come away from the crystal and go away and then join back up. It's got the form of each tooth, and there's 28 teeth, not 32, which means it's a child. And all of that was very convincing. And she told me about experiences with it, and I thought, yeah, okay, fine, good, yeah, but... And then she said, but would you like to see a film of us finding it? Now, Bruce, that's different. So I then watched the film of them finding it. And there were 6 people there, and I watched them fall as they clambered up the hill. And then I watched when she got to this one spot and said, the skull has told me it's here. And I looked around, and there was nothing there. I'm sorry, there was nothing. And they all said, I can't see him, I can't see him. And she bent down and picked up this red rock. And she said, the skull is inside the red rock, and I could see nothing. Then she started to scratch away the clay. It had been raining a lot. And there inside it was a perfect skull found. And then I got to see the reaction of all the people as she scratched it away. And I can tell you that it comes down to this. They either planted that days before, and all 6 of them played the game together, or it could be legitimate. The problem is that what I then did was I brought someone on side that I think is very psychic, that had nothing to do with this. He put it in his hand. He said, my heart is palpitating and I can hear voices. I said, oh, okay, that's another point. And then the big one comes up, mate. This is the one that really did convince me. You'll never know their names because they're never going to tell you. They want no money for it. And what they're doing right now is they're taking this skull around to all the sacred sites in Australia, paying for it themselves, and taking the skull to the sacred sites to increase the energy level of those sites. Now, they don't want you to know where they come from, who they are. They don't want any money for it. They don't want a cent for it. They don't want notoriety. Now, my problem is, if you're going to make a fake, if you're going to lie, you have to have a reason to lie. You've got to be able to gain something from this. And I met these people, and what was very interesting was the first time we met them, Evan was given permission to take a photograph of the skull. And the person who was this sort of like minder jumped up alongside Evan with both his fists firm.
A little bit scary.
And was going to punch him out. And she said, no, I gave him permission to take a picture of it. They're not going to publish it. So when we first started to write this article, we were to write an article about a crystal skull, and we didn't even have permission to put up one picture of it. So we then had to negotiate for the right to even put a picture up. Now, I'm going to tell you, from a human viewpoint, from seeing these people and watching them react, I'm inclined to think their story about this being brought from the centre by an Aboriginal woman who wrapped it in the clay and put it on this site is probably true. And the fact that it's a Mayan skull and that it looks after the children, since it's got 28 teeth instead of 32, which is what wisdom teeth have, I'm inclined to think that could be true too. But what makes me believe it's true, and I can't give the full story here, is one part of the crystal came away. It's never come away before. And the woman said the crystal skull had given you that piece of crystal. So I tried it. I took that piece of crystal and I tried to do what this lady did, was just leave it open. And then I found out why she covered the crystal in glue amongst all the sutures and covered up all of the eye sockets in a blue crystal. Because this thing doesn't stop. It went for 36 hours. It just kept going and going and going. It doesn't stop giving information. And she does that because it was going to kill her. And she told me I had to stop the skull because it was going to kill me. And what she does now is she drinks Diet Coke and smokes. And she does it deliberately, so she brings down her elevation and a vibration so I can't talk to her all day. And I watch this lady and I think, this skull's going to kill you. And I'm starting to think, when I put all that together, I can't prove it. I've got no science there, but you've got intuition. And I believe, as much as I hate to say it, I'm going to keep saying it, I think there's a 95% chance that crystal skull is legitimate. Now, they claim it's the 13th crystal skull, the most important of all of them. That's what they claim. This woman has shown me the writings, and she's probably written 3,000 or 4,000 pages of handwritten notes on what it's told her. I think there's a damn good chance that it's true, a 95%. Now, I won't go above that because I'm trying to be an archaeologist and a scientist also, and to say any of the stuff I've just said doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. I can't give you science to prove it. I can just give you reactions, the motivations of the people, seeing it being found, and then looking at the damn thing, and then watching it work for 36 hours, and every one of those gets a tick. So I believe it was meant to be found when it's found, and I believe it's got a role to play next year. But that one, that part of the story, I'm sitting on 95% because they could have bunged the whole thing on, couldn't they?
Yeah, it's possible.
But I've got to tell you, if they did, I'm a lousy judge of character. And God, we've been doing a lot of people now. If they bung that on, oh man, I give up. I really do, because they just seem so bloody genuine. And I can't convince anyone of that because I've met them and you'll never meet them because I don't want their faces known. My question is this, if they're doing it for bad reasons, what are they gaining from it? They're not getting notoriety. They're not getting money. They're not getting cred. Well, what do you get from that? I think it's legit.
What do you think? I mean, in terms of, is there any elders that have ever talked to you about, crystal skulls there? I mean, have you been able to at least sort of put that to any of the elders and say, what do they think about the chances of it being genuine, or have they got lore on crystal skulls? Have you had any feedback from that quarter?
No, look, here's one of the rules here. The elders I'm working with aren't the ones that most people think. You can't ask them. Honestly, Evan knows this too.
Sometimes I wish I could.
Yeah, look, it's not like that. When you're dealing with people like this that really do know a lot, look, I waited a year for my elder to make a comment about the rocks. For 1 year. Yeah. 1 year we waited, and then I found out the rocks, Ros's Rock 1 is so important I can't even tell you. It's probably the most important rock on the planet. I couldn't believe what I've been told, and I still have trouble taking it in. But it took a year to get this, and this came from a council of elders. So we never get to ask, do they know about it? Yeah, and I can tell you now, if we'd made a mistake, that part, I can tell you that if we make a mistake, they'll tell us if it's wrong. If it's right, I have to wait. Now, what will happen is one day, one of the elders will ring, and I'll bring up, and I'll start to talk about the skull. But unfortunately, we're under rules here that are different to Whitefellow rules here. And when I'm with that elder, one in particular, never knows which one I'm talking about, you never ask. You wait to be told. And then when you're told, 9 out of 10 times, Evan, does it make any sense to us?
No.
None whatsoever. No. Then a week and a half later, it starts to gel because, unfortunately, as I told you before, we're dealing with a content and a form of communication that's way above our level. So I will get comment on it one day. They know we wrote about it. They all know because all of our articles go out to the elders before they're even published to be checked. They know we've written. And I can tell you now, if we'd made a mistake, it wouldn't have gone out. They would have told us straight away, you can't put that in. Yeah. But when I'm going to get a comment on that, it could be tomorrow. It could be next week, it could be next month, and it could be next year. I don't know because when it comes to this, I'm still a novice. I've had one ceremony, although there's promises of another ceremony we go down there next time. That'll be my second. I need 5 before I can even start to understand that. So I'll probably be dead before I get to number 3. So, but they might tell me one day, and Bruce, if they do, I know you're very interested in that part, I'll let you know. But it'll be at their decision, their timing. And then the worst part is, Bruce, when they give us information on the skull, Do you know what's going to happen? We won't understand it anyway, so don't hold out too many hopes, because when you do get it, it'll be as cryptic as mud, I can tell you. Sometimes. I remember once when our elder came once the last time, in the end, first of all, people saying, why are you ignoring Kano? Why aren't you looking at it? In the end, everyone was, weren't they? Because every time they asked a question, they could never answer it. But we'll find out one day.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, for people, I suppose, particularly out there in the audience who maybe have never been involved with the more mystical side of reality, which, you know, really is fundamental reality. But it's difficult for those who are intrinsically, I mean, you could say that Daniella and myself have a foot in each world, I suppose. I mean, we've had a lot of mystical events and we've gone through a lot of weird stuff. But at the same time, you know, we're from a culture, you know, as you guys are, that doesn't subscribe to that. So, you know, we have a foot in each world. But you can kind of understand that those who are fully in the mystical, it's very difficult for them to communicate across those on the, you know, the other side. It is almost like two planets, you know, talking to each other and trying to hope for the best in the communication.
My elder has said that. He said it's like talking to a person from a different planet. You white fellas just don't get any of it, do you? I said, no, we don't. I said, Kano, we can't dance and we can't pick up what you're on about. It's part of our genetics. Our hips don't work and nor does our head. You're right. But the beauty of it is, I have on occasions worked out some really clever things I've been told. One in particular I worked out straight away, and I was ecstatic about that.
Oh, yeah, I remember
I
that.
got one, and I told him, Kano, I've worked out what you mean. He laughed his head off. He said, finally, I've been banging my head against the brick wall. I got it resolved. I said, yeah, but it may not work for another 2 years, but it's a better way to be taught. It's not simple. It's much harder, but when you get it out. Like, I'll give you one that I was taught that I did work out. The first language, which is original. He said, our first language never could create a fight or a misunderstanding. And you know why? And he told me this, and it made sense to me straight away. He said, our first language never had an adverb. Think about that for a while, and you'll work out why it doesn't create. Adverbs create anger, misunderstanding, and nuances that people don't fully understand. Verbs, nouns, and adjectives are simpler. The adverbs are the ones that create the fights. And here's this guy that's never been past, I think, year 3 in high school telling me our language doesn't create fights because we don't have adverbs. I thought that was one of the smartest things I've ever heard from a person who doesn't have a degree in anything.
True. I'm going to have to sort of jump on now just to the last few minutes where if you could just let everyone know what you've got, you know, planned in the near future in terms of speaking events or any upcoming books, and, you know, just to mention your website again as well. So we've got about 5 minutes, so you could quickly give people an update as to, you know, what's coming out from you guys in the near future.
Well, we're doing quite a few talks, obviously around Australia at the moment, because that's where we focus. We're doing a series of talks with Brian Forster and Michael Tellinger, and we're going to try and break into mainstream during August. And what we've done is we've booked out the Sydney Town Hall, the Melbourne Town Hall, the Adelaide Town Hall, Fremantle Town Hall, and we're trying to go into mainstream to try and drag them into the truth. And we're using Brian, ourselves and Michael to give an overview of the southern part of the world. And we're all going to be talking about the ancient civilizations that took place in all those areas. We're going to be doing that. We're doing talks. I think we're doing a talk in Sydney, May the 8th. In Sydney at Wesley Centre.
Nexus Conference.
Nexus Conference is a Nexus Conference, and we're talking with Eric von Daniken
and David Hatcher-Childress.
Yeah, we're talking at that one too. Yeah, there's quite a few coming up at the moment, and sort of there's a few more that are in the offing, and we basically just, like everything, we don't arrange anything. We don't have a manager. We don't do anything. We just let, and then people invite us, and we sort of let it run its own course. And it seems to be sort of building up a fair bit. And, yeah, look, what we try and do, and what we're trying to do at the moment, is to write an article about all of the 21 stones, and we're trying to put that up at the moment, which is quite difficult. And I suppose we don't know what we're doing, to be honest, Bruce. I mean, we don't have any long-term plans because we're working in a field where when we go onto country, we walk there with a quizzical look like, what are we going to see and what does it all mean? Please tell us. So we don't know what's going on then. We may be doing some talks with Graham Hancock next year. We're not sure about that. Still in the offing at the moment. That'll be worked out in the next month. And then hopefully soon after we might get overseas and start with people elsewhere.
Yep.
So I guess it's a case of everyone should keep an eye on your website for the sort of the latest updates, and which is, of course, forgottenorigin.com, isn't it? So
that's it.
For anyone who wants to follow you.
Yep, definitely.
And what we do is everything we write, we put up free. Any new article we write, and we might put in a book later, but it's very important. In the first instance, I know you'd agree with this, that once you put a price on it, you can't some people out. When it's free, everyone can read it. So we make sure that every article goes up free first. And we put the book up separately, but we need that to keep, as you understand too, Bruce. We're stuck in a society where we need some money, but we try and compromise as much as we can, because the information we're being given doesn't belong to us. It belongs to everybody. And people do need to realise, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, don't trust the people in authority anymore. They're not worried about us anymore. They don't care about us. They really don't. They don't want the truth to get out here. Their job now is very much simply, as you know, with your side up there, mate, their job is to make sure this information doesn't get out. They don't care past that point. That's all they care about. Don't share.
I think that's a good way to finish up there, just for people to, remember to look beyond the mainstream, to look at the work being done, beyond that fence. I wanted to just take the opportunity just to thank you both for coming on, and just to let everyone know, I know that we've had some technical difficulties, and it was the first show that Daniella and I hosted, and unfortunately we have been caught out by a few technical issues. So apologies to both of you that there's been some sound issues on this one. I hope we can have you back again, and we would have resolved that. So something we're going to have to do in the coming days is to sort out our audio equipment a bit better. So thank you both for coming on. It's been really fascinating, and I hope that everyone out there will go away and look at the website, so forgottenorigin.com. And of course, we'll join you at your speaking engagements, or just keep following really of all your work.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And as you know, it's a pleasure to talk to you and Daniella. And as listeners do know, we do go back a bit, and hopefully one day we're going to meet not Skype to Skype, but face to face. I'm sure that's going to happen.
I believe so. I do think that at some point that will happen. So we've had our episodes. We keep planning to come to Australia, and then things change. And at some point, I do believe we will end up there. And if not, of course, we hope to see you beyond the borders of Australia, perhaps.
We might come across and be doing talks and running you that way. One way or the other, mate, we will talk for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again. I'll just let everyone know. So you've been listening to Epic Voyages Radio. We are, of course, broadcast over the Inception Radio Network, and that's Mondays at, for us it's 8 p.m. Central Time, and we also rebroadcast again Friday evenings, and that's on darkmatterradio.net. So you can catch this again, and that's 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. So there's another opportunity for those that maybe missed some of the show. And please do check out, of course, the home website, which is epicvoyagers.com. And there's also a YouTube channel and a Facebook, which you'll find from there. So hopefully we'll see you all again. It's been great, been great having this opportunity to talk to our marvellous guests and to communicate out.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.
You say too much to learn. You say cover up is fine. The